What's up, everybody? I'm just kidding. Hi, I'm here to help you with this assignment. The Propaganda and MLKs I Have a Dream speech assignment. I will walk you through how to complete this assignment successfully using your own amazing brain power. Let's take it one step at a time. First thing you need to do is go to the assignment, click the link, make a copy of the Google Doc. You should have a Google Doc that looks just like this one. Once you have that, then you're going to do what the red letters say. You're going to click File. You're going to move it. You're going to locate your writing portfolio and put it in there. If you do not have a writing portfolio, please see me because what? Okay, anyway, read your instructions carefully. Okay. You are writing an analytical paragraph about how propaganda and narrative techniques were used effectively in Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. And you've got all the things that you need on hand to do this. Look at the requirements. You've got to have an introduction that gives background information, explain one propaganda technique, explain one narrative technique, and make sure that you're referencing specific examples as you do so. And then you're going to bring it all together by telling me how those techniques make this speech powerful, not just memorable, but even historical, because there were a lot of speeches from a lot of people during the civil rights movement. What makes this one so special? I want you to, before you get started, look at your supports. Notice you've got a list of techniques under the instructions. This is a good thing. You are welcome. You can choose from these techniques. There's definitions for you and everything. You can go through the speech, okay? Looking for powerful moments, something that speaks to you on some level, and then come over here to see what techniques it matches up with, okay? So let's get started with the speech. The first thing we have to do is we got to introduce the speech. Now, I had all of you watch the introduction video for this speech. We also watched the speech in its entirety during class. We answered some questions about the speech. So at this point, you should know enough about the speech to talk about it with some amount of confidence. However, if you do not, you may need to go back and rewatch the intro video or do some independent research on the March on Washington, Abraham Lincoln, the Gettysburg Address, the Emancipation Proclamation, the 13th Amendment, because the location of Martin Luther King's speech is important. He is standing in front of the Lincoln Memorial. Look how big this thing is. Take it in. Abraham Lincoln was the president who signed the Emancipation Proclamation, pushed for the 13th Amendment, and basically ended slavery in the United States. Okay? So the setting is important. You also may want to mention in the background info about the amount of media coverage, the number of physical people who were there, what other things were happening. Okay. Explain one propaganda technique. So I'm going to look at my document that I've got. Okay. I've made notes here that he had an allusion to the Gettysburg Address, and talks about standing in a symbolic shadow of a great American who signed the Emancipation Proclamation. He's talking about Abraham Lincoln. Also noticed a little further down, he mentions the architects of our republic who wrote the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. He calls them their magnificent words. All these are allusions. Sure, those are narrative techniques, right? Because he's referencing other important events and documents of historical significance, yes, but he's also engaging in a propaganda technique known as transfer. So we have to remember that this speech was not intended just for African American audience to hear. It's not just intended for people who are already fighting for equality. It's intended for everyone, especially people who are on the fence, especially people who are oblivious to the issues going on, who need some persuading, who need to be moved. Okay. He's fighting hard using this transfer to give the cause of civil rights in America credibility based on historical figures who already have a lot of universal respect with Americans. Because the founding fathers are considered to be the people who created our country and American idealism. Abraham Lincoln talked of equality and freedom for all. So he's hoping that by associating with these figures as much as possible, both him and his cause will get some of the respect given to them. Get it? Transfer over to them. All right. So that's my propaganda technique. Now I need to talk about a narrative technique that I think goes with it. So I noticed he talks about a promissory note. And he's arguing that it was signed by our founding fathers. He argues that all Americans are heirs to this promissory note. That means that all Americans have a right to it. He's talking about a check, a metaphorical check that African Americans have come to cash. He even says that much further down. He says, we've come to cash this check that will, quote, grant the riches of freedom and the security of justice. He's using narrative techniques to make a powerful argument here. African Americans are Americans. Americans were promised freedom and justice in the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, both of which are documents that are highly respected by all Americans. So this is a very compelling argument, and he's using a metaphor to do so because he's talking about cashing a metaphorical check. Okay, so I've got my narrative technique. I've got my propaganda technique. I got to bring it all together in my conclusion, right? So I've got to explain what makes them special. Okay. Well, I guess I could say that his choice of location made for a spectacular visual that we still get to enjoy today, right? Which was part of the transfer by standing under the actual memorial. He's engaging in transfer. Americans still see Lincoln as a figure who represents what is good about American ideals. And Martin Luther King successfully associated himself with that ideal. It was equally smart for him to use his argument as a banking metaphor. It's accessible for other Americans. They can understand it and relate to it on a very basic, even greedy level. Because if you know that you're entitled to money, you'll fight to get what you're owed. MLK took that relatableness to a whole new level. We can still relate to this argument. People still use this argument when talking about equality for other groups as well. That concludes my guide on how to do this. This is how I did it. This is my example. I want you to go and locate your own examples and talk about it in your own way. Make sense of it. You're going to struggle with it. It's not going to be perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect. You just need to try. Okay. Please feel free to use the timestamps in the description to review, go back, or jump ahead as you need to. Good luck.